Next, Republican State Senator Jim Oberweiss, candidate for the U.S. Senate, speaks to the Agricultural Roundtable. He lays out his positions as a candidate for the U.S. Senate. This runs about 30 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do have to object, though, to this group right off the bat. I have a real point that I'd like to pick with you. In my family, I grew up knowing that it was really not proper, not good manners to serve naked apple pie. You got to have some Oberweiss ice cream to go with it if you want a really good apple pie, but I don't know, that just didn't happen, so I guess we'll have to live with it. Let me ask this. How many of you would like to send the career politicians in Washington a message in November? Not a little message, a really loud, emphatic, we've had it with failure message that will be heard across all 50 states. Sending Dick Durbin packing will get the nation's attention. It will rock the status quo and tell every other career politician in Washington that big government, overreaching regulation, and the unconscionable use of the IRS to stifle the political speech of your opponents will not stand in America. It's within our grasp. In less than 10 weeks here in Illinois, Republicans, independents, and open-minded Democrats can say enough is enough. Enough of borrowing money from China for projects that we don't need. Enough of politicians telling us which doctor we have to see, which light bulbs we can buy, and which new tax we're going to have to pay. Enough of politicians who trap poor children in failing schools because their rigid ideology won't let them allow parents and students the educational choices that they need. Enough of politicians lying about everything from Obamacare to Benghazi. Enough of politicians dividing us by class and race and demonizing those who are successful. Enough of failure. That's the biggest reason I'm running for the U.S. Senate. Dick Durbin's utter failure. Is our economy strong and producing good jobs and opportunities for the people of Illinois? Judging Dick Durbin by that standard, he has undeniably failed us. The average family income in Illinois has declined by $5,053 since the last time he ran for the U.S. Senate 6 years ago. Millionaire career politician Dick Durbin has presided over one of the worst periods of economic stagnation and decline in Illinois history. No matter what political sleights of hand he uses in this race to divert attention from a sorry record, it's still a sorry record, and I plan to hold him accountable for it. Dick Durbin also has horribly failed the poor and middle class in Illinois. Like lots of ultra-liberals, Durbin professes to care about the poor and middle class, but the results of his policies say quite the opposite. Since he last ran for election, 340,000 fewer Illinoisans are employed, and 300,000 more citizens are in poverty. And incomes, as I just mentioned, have actually declined. If a manager of one of my ice cream stores or one of my mutual funds had that kind of a sorry record, we would have fired him a long time ago. You, the voters, have a chance to fire Dick Durbin in less than 10 weeks. And Dick Durbin will never change. He spent 32 years in Washington, voting for virtually every tax and regulation known to mankind. Our federal budget is bleeding with deficit and debt that's being immorally piled on our children and our grandchildren. And Dick Durbin's solution is to bring back earmarks. Dick Durbin never learns from failure. He doubles down on it. The only way for us to change results is to change senators. And Bo, I hope you're listening, because you're one of those that are going to have to pay the price that my generation is racking up in terms of debt. Unfortunately, you can't vote. I wish you could. The good news is that while we're battered and bruised in Illinois, we know the truth. We know we can do better. Unlike my opponent who spent his career in government, I've spent my career in the real world. With the help of a lot of good men and women of all backgrounds and origins, we've taken Oberweiss Dairy from one store and 50 employees to today's 43 stores and over 1,200 employees. The family-owned investment business that I started has also grown and prospered, bringing high-paying jobs to the men and women who work for us and solid long-term investment returns for the families who invested with us. At the same time that our businesses were creating jobs and prosperity for Illinois families, Dick Durbin was killing jobs and prosperity in Illinois. That's the choice in a nutshell in this election. Do you want a career politician who made a career out of taking money out of your pocket and restricting your freedoms, or will you go with someone who understands how to make money and how to make the economy work for everyone? When you elect me in November, I'll get to work right away on 4 agenda items. First, I'll repeal and replace Obamacare with a more sensible, market-driven health care reform that will restore the confidence and trust of the American people. We'll keep some of the good parts. We'll keep the pre-existing condition exclusion, insurance for young adults under 26, and add competition across state lines, which we should always have had but haven't had, to keep down costs and get rid of about 20,000 pages of gibberish regulations. And we'll do it with bipartisan support. Unlike the partisan disaster that we have now, where not one single Republican supported the current Obamacare bill. Second, I'll work to dramatically simplify our tax code and lower corporate and individual tax rates for nearly all Americans. A broader, flatter tax code will unleash tremendous economic growth and simultaneously allow us to dramatically scale back the IRS, which has been used by Dick Durbin and his allies to silence the political speech of millions of Americans. Speaking of the IRS, I'll work tirelessly to make sure that we get the answers we deserve on the IRS scandal. I recently called for the appointment of a special prosecutor to look into the Durbin attempt to use the IRS against conservative groups. It was wrong when Richard Nixon attempted to use the IRS against political opponents, and it's equally wrong when Richard Durbin does the same thing. Third, I'll work tirelessly to balance our budget and to make the federal government smaller, smarter, and more geared toward growth and opportunity. We have too many duplicative programs and pay-to-play politics. Instead, we ought to be expanding growth and opportunity for Americans by encouraging school choice in impoverished areas and by encouraging the U.S. energy revolution that is within our grasp right here in Illinois. The American people want smaller, smarter, more productive government, and we're going to give it to them. Fourth, I'll work hard to build support for federal term limits. If 8 years is good enough for the President of the United States, 8 years should be good enough for Congress as well. We've seen the damage that career politicians like Dick Durbin and Mike Madigan have done to our country. It's nearly a given that the longer a member of Congress serves in Washington, the bigger the spender they become. People are tired of Congress spending money it simply does not have, and that has got to end. It can't be done overnight. I'm not predicting we can do it in 1 year or even 2 years. But Paul Ryan has put forth a plan that will get us back to a balanced budget over the next 10 years. Those are the kinds of ideas we need to look at. And that's what I pledge to the people of Illinois. You know what you're getting with me as your next U.S. Senator, and we also know what you'd be getting with another 6 years of Dick Durbin. The choice couldn't be simpler. There are no mysteries in this campaign. From Dick Durbin, you'll hear a dizzying array of smokescreens, red herrings, and straw men. War on women, minimum wage, Koch brothers. What they all have in common is that they have little or nothing to do with improving the lives of Illinois families. Dick Durbin and his allies in Congress, backed by a friendly media, will do their best to keep the focus off of their sorry records. Dick Durbin is a very good politician. You're going to hear that this afternoon. He'll say what needs to be said politically, no matter what the truth is. I won't be able to keep up with him as a politician. Nobody out Dick Durbin's Dick Durbin. I freely admit I'm not as good a politician as I am a job creator. What I'll bring to this race is a determination to keep the focus on what is important to Illinois families and to hold Dick Durbin accountable for his record. Finally, I'll provide a vision of a brighter future for our beleaguered state. I'm confident that this is the year that Illinois citizens finally say they're fed up with the empty, false rhetoric and choose instead someone interested in real results for Illinois families. We live in a state that could be the best in the nation with just one efficient prairie fire. Our Midwest heritage tells us the prairie fire clears plant life that is impeding the prairie from thriving. Once the fire takes out the impediments to growth, growth returns. With your help, there'll be a prairie fire in Illinois this November. A prairie fire of reform and rejuvenation and a return to liberty and prosperity for all Illinois families. We can make it happen with your help and with your vote. I think most of you know that I grew up in the family dairy business. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time baling hay. Yes, I milked a cow a couple of times, but not very often. When I was a kid, our family had 100 head of cows, and that was a pretty big dairy. Now 100 head is pretty small. But the price of milk's at an all-time high, so most of the dairy farmers are okay. But I believe I understand what it takes to make our farms successful. I believe I understand the importance of ending the death tax so that we can pass our family farms on to the next generation without having to mortgage them to the hilt to pay the government for taxes when we've already paid the government on the earnings that we might have generated. I have handed out a sheet. If you haven't gotten one, Dimitri or Liz have some more sheets back there that be happy to give you, which kind of covers our policy on a variety of different ag issues. And I'd be happy to answer whatever questions you'd like to ask. And before I do that, let me just tell you one other thing. As you probably know, we also have a race for governor of Illinois. That's going to be a very important race also. I believe that Bruce Rauner will bring a breath of fresh air to Springfield, new ideas, not someone who is beholden to special interests and to union bosses. We desperately need that change in Springfield. I've spent my whole life in business except for the last 2 years when I've been serving in Springfield, and it's been a real education for me. And by the way, I've learned to work very closely with the other side. If you're a Republican, you don't have any choice if you want to get anything done. One of the things that I did get done, when I showed up in Springfield 2 years ago, they gave us a list of Republican bills that had been defeated and asked if any of us wanted to take on any of those. I looked at the list and I saw one that was to increase the speed limit on our interstates to 70 miles an hour. I said, you know what, that makes sense. 34 other states already do it. It'll speed up commerce in this state. And by the way, people are already driving 70 miles an hour or 72 or 74. Anyway, why not adjust the law to fit what the real world is? And my own leadership said, Jim, go ahead and sponsor that if you like, because you'll learn something about the educational process, but it has no chance of passing. Don't even think about it. Can't be done. It's been defeated 4 times in a row, and we had more Republicans then than we do now. I said, well, okay, what do I got to lose? I will learn something about the process, and I did. And I learned very quickly. And in fact, we got that bill passed with the help of some Democrats, including Marty Sandoval, who we've gotten to be pretty good friends with over the last couple of years. And let me tell you, when we see what goes on in Washington, it's dysfunctional. I think we all know that. And by the way, I will never sell out my principles. I was one of 6 Illinois senators that received a 100% approval rating from the American Conservative Union, 100%. And yet, I was able to listen to the other side, convince the other side on some important issues that are important to business in Illinois, so that we try to stop driving companies out of this state and stop driving people out of this state. We need to turn that around. We need to do it now. We got a great opportunity to send that message. So I hope you'll also consider Bruce. I think he's going to be here to join you this afternoon, but it's absolutely critical. The same thing is true in Washington. It's critical that we elect 6 more Republican senators so that we'll have some balance in Washington. We'll have a legislature that is Republican, and you've got a presidency executive that is Democrat. Hopefully we'll get some good results. And let me tell you, I believe in working with the other side. I will work with the other side. I'll listen to the other side, and we'll try to come up with the best legislation possible. And I think my example would be Ronald Reagan, who had a very different political philosophy from Tip O'Neill. And yet they worked together in a gentlemanly fashion to craft some pretty good legislation. And that's exactly what I'll try to do. I started to say I was going to tell you a little bit about what I've been doing with my time. While in Springfield, I spent a lot of my time in central and southern Illinois. But the last month or two, I've been spending most of it on the south side of Chicago, in the African American community. Some of you may or may not have heard of Pastor Corey Brooks, also known as the Rooftop Pastor. This is a guy who has a church on Martin Luther King Drive, about 6600 South Martin Luther King Drive. Across the street there was a motel that was used for prostitution and drug sales. Pastor Brooks went up without permission on the roof of that motel and said he was going to stay there until people donated enough money to tear that building down and end that problem in that neighborhood. He went up in November. He came down in February. 3 months on a roof in Chicago in a cold winter, but he got it done. People did donate enough money. The building has been torn down, and now they're working on building a community development center. This guy is a true American patriot. He's a minister in the African American community who's saying government can help start some of these programs, but we must take individual initiative. We must take our own future in our own hands and make sure that we make some of these things happen and not rely on government for everything. Philosophy I couldn't agree with more. And incidentally, he's endorsed our campaign. We're going to be meeting with a number of other African American community leaders and ministers over the next few weeks, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to announce several more endorsements from that community. And by the way, he started a second program called Brothers on the Block. And with that program, he is trying to recruit 5,000 men to stand on the 500 highest crime corners in the city of Chicago on Friday nights to tamp down some of the violence that goes on in the city. And I will tell you, I've been out with him 5 Friday nights, standing on the corner of 79th and Cottage Grove, which is supposed to be the #1 corner for crime, handing out our information and asking other people to join the pledge against violence in the city of Chicago. 2 other politicians showed up there for 10 minutes when the media were there and left. I've been there for about 2 hours every one of those nights because I believe it's important. There's precious little we can do to control that violence except help people get jobs. And to get jobs, they have to get a better education. We've got to focus on those things. We've got to reduce the violence that's going on in Chicago. It will benefit the entire state. I'd love to take your questions on agriculture or anything else you want to ask me, with one exception. I have to ask you, please do not request the formula for ice cream, because that I won't give you. Anything else, wide open.
Very good. Well, let's show our appreciation, Jim Oberweiss, for being here today. If you have a burning question, we do have staff members along the sides. Please ask for a card and get your question wrote and get it back to them. But I have a question that came from the crowd earlier.
Rich, before you do that, I'm reminded by Dimitri that I made the classic businessman mistake that a politician would never make. I forgot to ask you for 2 things. Your vote, hopefully vote early. And secondly, to go to our website, which is jimoberweiss.com. Give us your email address so we can let you know what's going on in the campaign. click on volunteer, anything you're willing to do, make phone calls, talk to your neighbors, have a yard sign. We need your help. I can't do it alone. Thank you. Back to you. I'm sorry.
Very well. Illinois' transportation system should be the envy of the world, with the rail, highways, waterways, bridges, and roads that we have here in this state. The infrastructure that is in place needs some improvement, needs some work, and if we're going to be a world-class respondent to delivering grain and goods to the world throughout the United States, how do we pay for these improvements to keep the upgrades where they need to be, that we can be a competitor in this world market?
Well, I'm not sure if this is politically the right thing to say, but you'll learn that I'm a businessman, not a politician. Look, I happen to believe very much in user fees, and to the degree that we can, at a reasonable cost, tailor user fees to help with those infrastructure improvements, I think it makes a lot of sense. Tollways are a good example. None of us like tollways. None of us like paying a toll when we drive on there. But you know what? As far as I'm concerned, it's better than higher taxes. Higher taxes in the state drive people out of the state, drive businesses out of the state. User fees are unpleasant, but they can provide the funding that we need to improve our infrastructure. And to me, that's the best solution.
Very good. Second question. Illinois farmers are very concerned about the proposed EPA Waters of the United States rule change. What is the proper route of EPA? What's the proper rule of EPA regulations of water under the Clean Water Act?
You mean proper role, I assume, right?
Role. Sorry.
Look, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, my opponent, Mr. Durbin, has never met a new regulation or a new tax that he doesn't like. I'm a business guy. Guess what? The dairy industry is one of the most highly regulated businesses, and actually the food industry as a whole is one of the most highly regulated businesses there is. I realize how destructive extreme regulation can be. It is critical in the food industry that we assure the safety of our food supply for all Americans and all Illinoisans. But some of the regulations that we've seen go to absolute extremes. We need balance in Washington to control that. And that's why I said I believe a Republican legislature, if the Republicans can take the Illinois Senate in November, will be balanced by a Democrat president, and we'll end up with better legislation and better solutions to our problems. And I think that's the best thing for our country.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.